What's up, mountain movers? Welcome back to the 1720 podcast. As we've talked over the last few weeks, our schedules have been crazy, and trying to find time where everything lines up perfectly is just a little more difficult in this season than it has been for, the last couple hundred episodes. So as Kevin and I were talking about something that we could put out for this week, our mind immediately went back to episode 30 with Brent Gleeson. The episode is one of my favorite 5 or 6 in terms of just the amount of fun we had recording with him. But also you'll recall from the photos back on episode 30, this was a recording studio that had not been painted. I believe there were chairs racked up in the corners. There was a whiteboard that still had something written in Sharpie and we couldn't get off. The pictures that were taken were shaky, and I think there's one that's through a microphone stand. But there's a really good bit in there that finds itself sprinkled throughout all the episodes about Brad and the donkey, and that makes me laugh every time it comes up. And so for some of our new listeners who have heard that bit replayed over and over and revisited from time to time, this is where it originated. In addition to the fun and sort of an epic bit that we got out of there, though, there are great nuggets from Brent Gleeson, who was a former Navy SEAL and wrote a book called Embrace the Suck. And we spent a lot of time talking with him about the book, about things that he had learned from the book, about teaching your kids grit in instances when it seems like they don't need to be gritty, preparing them for the future. And so there's just a ton of great nuggets in there. And so we wanted to go way back to episode 30, revisit that one for you guys, and hope that perhaps on a first listen for some of the new folks, and maybe on a second or third listen for some of the old folks who've been listening for a while, that you get some nuggets out of this one that maybe you didn't get the first time. Don't dismay. We're not just rerunning old episodes. We have a couple of great guests lined up over the course of the next couple of weeks, including an episode that has not yet been titled, but when we'll be talking about sort of all the things Kevin and I have been up to for the last few weeks, perhaps even months, leading to some of our scheduling problems. So stay tuned for that. Until then, here's Brent Gleeson.
What's up, mountain movers? Kevin Carey here with my co-host Stuart.
Hello, everybody.
Thank you for joining 1720, and we're honored to have a guest, Brent Gleeson, with us. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's an honor to be on the show.
Thanks for coming down, right? Like we were just talking before we hopped on. Brent is in town from San Diego, and so bringing you high-quality audio instead of Zoom stuff.
This is the main reason I flew all the way out here to see you guys.
Just to sit in the Texo studio for 1720. Yeah,
that's right.
We're going to get a surprise invoice next week. First class flight, the whole nine.
Yeah,
I thought we talked about that already.
We don't pay first class. Sorry. All right, so we normally kick this thing off just for those who don't know who Brent Gleeson is. Give us like your elevator pitch. What's your 5 seconds of who you are, man?
Sure. Grew up in Dallas, Texas, did undergrad at SMU, worked as a financial analyst for Trammell Crow Company for a year, joined the Navy, became a SEAL, went to war a few times, transitioned out, built a couple companies, written a couple books, and wife, 4 kids, 2 dogs.
What kind of dogs? There's a lot in there, but all of a sudden I'm interested in the dogs.
Yeah, of all that, I just said the dogs is what he asked. You must be a dog guy.
No, actually I'm not, but we won't get bogged down on that. We won't get bogged down on that. No, a lot of ground to cover.
We have a rescue dog. She's a mix, probably the Australian Shepherd and Lab, and then we have a crazy 1-year-old German Shepherd, untrained and smart.
Yeah. Well, the cool thing is I got connected with you through LinkedIn. It was through your new book, Embrace the Suck. Immediately downloaded it on Audible and started listening to it while I was running. So, very fitting and ironic at the same time. And a lot of laughs in the book, a lot of motivation in the book. But the biggest thing is you mentioned it in the elevator pitch. You go from SMU financial analyst to at Trammell Crow to Navy SEAL. And what does that transition look like?
I thought that seemed like an obvious transition.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Isn't that what everybody did?
It is actually kind of a funny story because I had a really good friend at SMU, one of my fraternity brothers who was a year behind me in school. And he actually was one of these young men who had more or less a childhood dream of becoming a Navy SEAL. Yeah. Now, keep in mind, the mindset was a little different. This was just pre-9/11, so it was peacetime. So it was more of a personal challenge and something to, aspire to. And I had no no aspirations or visions of military service at all. I was, going down the commercial real estate path and wanted to, eventually probably be a real estate developer. But he and I started training together. So I had played sports in college, played rugby, and wanted to stay fit, have an accountability partner, and also kind of simultaneously help a good friend prepare for his arduous, uncertain journey ahead. And so we were training every night, running, swimming, calisthenics, training for marathons on the weekends. And so by nature, we were spending a lot of time together, having a lot of dialogue about the implications of what he was attempting to accomplish. And obviously it piqued my interest. So I started, researching and reading books around the history of the naval special warfare community, our forefathers from the underwater demolition teams in World War II to how we essentially cut our teeth as an elite assault force in Vietnam and conflicts thereafter. And over that period of time, that growing fascination, led to the culmination ultimately of a decision to join him on his journey. And I remember I was sitting on the 42nd floor of my office at Trammell Crow in downtown Dallas, and I sat down and I was supposed to be working, but I wasn't. So I was one of those disengaged employees because I had a new vision. And I wrote my parents a letter telling them, hey guys, I know I've never talked about this, but I am quitting my job that you were so happy that I have, and I'm enlisting in the Navy to attempt to become a SEAL, which arguably has about an 85 to 90% failure rate. So as you can imagine, before the cautious optimism set in, there was more of panic. And so my dad actually, his first step was to introduce me to one of his, my parents both went to SMU too, and one of his swim teammates at SMU had graduated SMU and become a SEAL during the Vietnam War.
Oh, wow.
And
that's a cool story. Yeah.
That guy was actually living out in La Jolla, where in San Diego, where all the initial training happens. So he introduced me to Tom, who was a Merrill Lynch, running a business out of Merrill Lynch. And I think the initial strategy, though, of introducing me to Tom was have Tom talk me out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then it was the speeding freight train from there.
I know it was in one of the books that you walked through the hallway with a bunch of papers to pretend you were busy because you had to go train and all that through that journey.
Well, yeah, because I wanted to, every night I was living in the uptown area of Dallas. So I would run about 4 miles from my apartment to SMU, swim a mile, do calisthenics, run 4 miles back. So pretty time consuming training regimen. So, I wanted to leave the office around 5 or 5:30, but I was also the new guy, and people don't expect new guys, analysts especially, to be leaving before the boss.
Yeah, right.
So the more I was training, the more serious I got about doing it before I announced to my team that I was going to be leaving the organization. I didn't want to be tasked with something new at 5:30. So I would literally put a bunch of papers like this in a manila folder and walk briskly through the office from the coffee room and back and kind of look stressed to make sure that people, I'll leave him alone. He looks like he's really into a project right now. It didn't work very well. But
it reminds me of George Costanza from Seinfeld when he's trying to fake his job and he looks really upset. And he's moving papers and like, oh, don't bother George. He's under it.
Where do you think I got the idea?
Really?
Yes.
So good.
That and napping under my desk.
Yeah, with the alarm clock. It's a bomb.
What? Is that Costanza too?
Yeah.
I remember the napping under the desk. I don't remember that part.
He kept modifying his desk and then he put an alarm clock in there and his boss heard it. It's like fake George Steinbrenner, I think.
Yeah.
Man, that's a classic.
Oh, man. Seinfeld, I was not expecting to come up in the middle of a how did you become a Navy SEAL story.
There's a lot of subtle nuances in my journey.
Yeah. All right. So mom and dad, what do they think? You're crazy. They're trying to talk you out of it. See what Tom will tell you.
Initially, they asked a lot of questions and, obviously, being who they are, they did a lot of their own research. And obviously my dad called Tom and was asking him about it. And again, a little bit different because it was peacetime. So there wasn't that immediate fear of, going downrange into a combat zone.
Yeah, time frame is here because obviously it happens while you're training or in the SEALs. So what's the timeline here?
Graduated SMU in 99. Okay. Immediately started working for Crow right after I graduated. And then that bled into 2000. And then my buddy and I, once I did leave Crow after I think it was about 9 months, we moved up to Crested Butte, Colorado to train for a few more months at extreme high altitude to really get our bodies and minds in the best condition we could. And then joined the Navy in the summer of 2000. And then immediately went to basic training and then straight into SEAL training. And then I went to BUD/S, and you basically, just so the listener understands, the pipeline is well over a year, and it's broken into different segments. But what you think of typically SEAL training you see on documentaries or movies is
boat
BUDS.
teams and stuff like that.
It's basic underwater demolition SEAL is the acronym of BUDS, and it's 6 months long with 3 phases. Hell Week being the 5th week, and then you go on to advanced training or SQT, SEAL qualification training. And we had a few days off between BUDS and SQT, and that's when 9/11 happened.
Oh man, timing of that is crazy, right?
Well, it is, but people always ask, well, what was the mindset, of people? But within obviously the special operations community, it's go time. You're all in already, and now you're really all in. And it was, and this isn't to sound macho or crazy, but people wanted to get downrange and take the fight to the enemy. And special operations had boots on the ground 36 hours after the second tower fell.
Wow.
Tier 1 assets, down there. But and just historically looking back, we're like, well, this is going to be over before it begins. We got to get over there. And
20 something years later.
And here we are.
Yeah. I actually got chill bumps when you said that, because like the idea would have been like, I think to the listener, you think, oh, that's kind of scary that happened when you're in the middle of training. But I'm not a SEAL, but I can appreciate the mentality of that's why I'm here. Like, let's do this.
Well, let me tell you an interesting quick story about mindset is one of the guys in the class ahead of me, we run 6 classes a year. So every couple months, new classes begin.
Mm-hmm.
And he had tried to quit during Hell Week. And one of the instructors liked him, or maybe he was a friend of a friend, and encouraged him to stick around. And he did. And when 9/11 happened, guess what? He quit. Left the teams. Turned in his trident.
Really?
Mm-hmm. That's why we have the process.
I was just thinking like they were trying to get rid of that guy, or he was trying to like self remove.
As an officer, if you quit during BUDS, you are never allowed to return. Enlisted can come back depending on the situation, but officers are never allowed to come back.
Man, that's a crazy story too.
So you're prepping to go to BUDS and done some research on BUDS, haven't lived it. I'm sure Hell Week lives up to its name, and I'm sure it didn't. Your training didn't hold a candle to what you came in and expected.
Right. Yeah, it's and I mentor young guys into the program now. I've mentored 7 people now. I'm not taking credit for their success, but all have become SEALs. But also that's just being careful with who I spend my time with and the guys I select, who perceivably have the right passion and vision for what they're trying to accomplish. And, they have the same questions I do. Well, how do I prepare? What's the hardest part? How do I get through that? And there is no real answer for that, because it's a different physical and emotional cognitive journey for everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody has a different experience, with especially Hell Week. So for the listener, Hell Week is the brutal crucible that all SEALs share that very few students actually navigate. So for easy math, you might begin first phase of BUDS with a couple hundred students in your class. You'll lose about half of those before you even get to Hell Week, because those weeks leading up to Hell Week are very similar to Hell Week. You just get to sleep a few hours a night. And then you go into Hell Week. Everybody goes into Hell Week either injured, sick, or both. You're not starting off as a high performer going into Hell Week, which is, arguably going to be one of the worst weeks of your life. And it's designed that way. Starts on a Sunday evening, ends on a Friday afternoon. The beauty of the Sunday is you report to the classroom early in the morning and you don't know exactly when it's going to start. That's by design, of course. So they let the anxiety and the fear of failure eat away at your soul before you begin. And during Hell Week, you literally you run the equivalent of multiple marathons while wet and sandy. You swim dozens of miles in the open frigid ocean. People think, oh, California. No, the water's cold.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we were a winter Hell Week. It was 55-degree water. And one of their goals is to keep you, cold, wet and sandy and borderline hypothermic off and on throughout the entire week.
Yeah.
And so you're running the obstacle course multiple times a day, endless calisthenics, brutal beatings. It's constant motion and pretty much constant second stage hypothermia. And you're doing that with, broken bones, stress fractures, joint injuries, severe, the most severe chafing, gentlemen, that you could ever imagine.
Yeah.
In all the areas you would never want to be severely chafed. I'm saying no skin on your shins, knees, between your legs, around your waist. Your nipples are gone.
Yeah.
And the top of your head is a bloody mess from carrying boats around.
Oh my gosh.
So it's awesome.
I am 100% sure the physical component of that is unbelievably difficult. To me, the part that would be so harrowing was not the body part, though. You're trained for that.
Yeah.
It's what's in your head.
It's Yeah. People always ask, well, is it more physical? Is it more mental? And, obviously most people err on the side that it's definitely more mental. Yeah, your body's broken. You're in, severe pain. You're freezing cold. But you're experiencing, deep anxiety, a fear of failure, stress, and you're trying to work collectively with your team and your boat crew. And people are dropping like flies. And, for some people, for me, when people are like, well, how did that react? How did that impact you mentally when you saw people quit? I was like, I'm more of an analytical thinker. I was like, that's great. Statistically, my chances just went up, gentlemen.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to make friends in the early stages of buds. It goes, oh, where's Johnny? Oh, Johnny quit 2 days ago. You didn't know that?
Right.
Because it's chaos. You're just like, and you're so delirious by the second day of Hell Week that you're hallucinating. You're just staying in motion. And then we had a very unfortunate experience in our Hell Week. Our class leader, the highest ranking officer in the class, died on Thursday, 15 hours before we were going to be secured from Hell Week.
Oh my gosh.
He had caught really bad pneumonia, and we can Monday morning quarterback it all day long, but as opposed to medically pulling him from Hell Week, they asked him, can you continue? And of course, the guy he was like, hell yeah, I'm going to continue.
Right.
And he got, a really bad pulmonary edema, his lungs filled with fluid. We were in the pool and he drowned.
Oh.
So, and you know what the commanding officer of Buds told us? They had pulled us out of the pool. It was pure chaos. You could hear it in the instructors' voices. They're like, get out of the pool, get against the fence, face the other way, look down, close your eyes. And you could definitely tell that something is wrong because SEAL instructors don't panic.
Yeah.
Right.
They yell a lot, but they don't panic. And they got us up. They ran us back across the street from the Naval Amphibious Base to the Special Warfare Center, put us in the classroom. We waited and waited and waited. And ultimately they came back in and they're like, he just walked to the straight of the room and turned around and said, gentlemen, Lieutenant John Scott is pronounced dead. Lieutenant Parado, you're second in command. You're now class leader. He said, gentlemen, get used to this feeling you have right now.
Mm-hmm.
This is what life in the teams will be like. This will not be the last friend or teammate you lose. And if this was a book or movie, we'd call that foreshadowing. Because literally, again, 7 or 8 months or whatever it was later was 9/11.
Right.
And so, yeah. And as you can imagine, I can't remember how many funerals I've been to since then. So.
Yeah, right. Do you when you get eventually deployed, right? Do you go with those guys from your buds group, or are you just a new group of dudes?
You can. It depends. You get in advanced training. I'm not sure it's a similar process now. Probably in advanced training, you can fill out a wish list of your top 3 teams you want to go to. Most people pick a coast. Do I want to go East Coast? We have teams in Virginia Beach in that area. And we have the other teams in San Diego and one in Hawaii. And so people pick based on mostly on their geographical location, or if they have friends in another team, or they're from the East Coast, or they're from the West Coast. So I picked Team 5, and I did have one guy from my buds class that was in my first platoon. So
cool. So deployed a little. Did you say 2 times?
3.
3 times. When were those?
Yeah, and honestly, I'll say that my contribution to this war on terror pales in comparison to many of my brothers and just many servicemen and women who do this as a career. These days in special operations, that's nothing. I mean, I've got friends who've done 15 combat deployments. Now again, career special operators.
Yeah.
That was never part of my plan, and I kind of stuck to that plan. But 2 deployments to Iraq and 1 to Africa.
Eventually back to the States. I don't know what the term is for getting out of the military.
Transition.
Yeah. What's next for you?
That's always a big topic in the military is, the difficulty sometimes of that transition. And what I've seen is people who have a very executable plan, when they transition out and they start, planning for that transition well before they get out, usually have more success, or they also aren't distracted by, some of the other burdens they carry, emotionally or mentally. And so, cause they're focused on, the new career or the new path of the new vision or whatever they're whatever goals they set. So my transition plan that came together was to go to graduate school immediately after. So I took the GMAT before my last deployment. I said, trying to study for the GMAT and then get ready for deployment was kind of difficult, but it was kind of funny how competitive we are in the teams. There were a few other guys who were transitioning at the same time, and they were going to go to grad school too. So I was like, what was your GMAT score? I'm like, I'm not telling you, dude. What was yours? Yeah. And because one guy who I knew he did his undergrad at Stanford, super smart platoon commander. And he and I started the same GMAT prep course. And he went one day, he was like, this is bullshit. I'm just going to study on my own. And he aced it. Wow. Whereas I studied my butt off, and let's say I got a good enough score to get into grad school.
I can relate to the latter.
Yeah, I was just about to say, not everybody gets dealt the same hand of cards. You just play with what you got, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's like, it's the same mantra. Like, you go to medical school, you go to law school, if you pass, you're a lawyer, you're a doctor.
Yeah.
We joke about the bar exam as being an examination of minimal competency. And it's like, well, you're not too stupid to be a lawyer, I guess. That's what the exam tells you.
This'll work.
This'll do, yeah. Anyway.
You can remember some things.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I started the grad school program like literally a week after I got out. So,
and I think we had a conversation before we got on air. Before Taking Point launches, you have a few business ventures prior to that.
Yeah, so the first, a very cliche story. I met my former business partner in grad school. And of course, I had never had aspirations of being an entrepreneur either, which arguably has a similar failure rate as SEAL training. So I was like, well, I had developed a taste for calculated risk. So we actually, one of our projects for our finance class became the initial business plan for the first company, which was a early version it was a home finding search engine. So early version of like Trulia or Zillow. And we raised about $1.5 million. We graduated and launched it, raised about $1.5 million. And its rapid growth was not due to our entrepreneurial savvy and intellect. It was because we were riding the housing bubble all the way to the top. And then 2008 happened, and 2009, and it didn't implode immediately, but it definitely plateaued. So that was my first experience pivoting on the battlefield of business. We're like, oh shit, we need to find some new revenue streams. We need to diversify, quick, pivot. But what we did was we had learned so much about digital media, analytics, lead generation, with just running that business and driving traffic to the site for our clients and customers, to generate home buyer leads, that we started a digital agency. Because a lot of our clients were like, well, do you guys build websites? Do you guys do search engine optimization or paid media strategy? And we're like, okay.
Yeah, sure I do.
And now we're like, yes, absolutely we do. So we actually borrowed $100,000 from the first company. We gave those shareholders equal common stock shares in the new venture, because it's the ethical thing to do, but you could argue from a legal standpoint that it's what they call it, a corporate opportunity, meaning we're kind of technically using, they see it as we're using their money to start a new venture. So they definitely want a piece of that. Yeah. And it was the right thing to do because that business took off and, doubled in size in both headcount and revenue every year, and exited out of that in 2016. But like we were talking about before, what I found was not necessarily a passion for a specific industry, but a passion for building organizations and great people practices and designing a culture that delivers actual business outcomes, and how you develop leaders and how leadership impacts employee retention, customer retention, and profitability.
Yeah. Which is, all the things we got to leading up to here. Our listeners love hearing those stories, but this is like the meat and potatoes, because I think most of our listeners are folks who are trying to figure that out, growing their businesses, just looking for a nugget of something, to help pick up and move the ball forward every day, sort of say. So I'm looking forward to chewing through some book talk here in a second.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were talking about this earlier. People are like, well, investing in our people and developing leaders is costly. It's time intensive. And, what if those people leave? And like Henry Ford said when he was challenged on that many years ago, he said, well, what if we don't develop them and they stay? Right. Then you got a bunch of mediocre people all doing different things and the business it is impossible for the business to grow past a certain point.
Mm-hmm. And we don't understand our timeline until we can reflect back on it. But you have that SEAL career, MBA, a couple business startups that I'm sure had a ton of adversity in the scaling and turnover and all sorts of headaches.
A lot of me in the fetal position, crying.
It's like hell week out.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great leadership style.
Every day's a Monday, and this is my own company. What's going on? But that helps probably launch Taking Point and makes you more well-armed to help the business sector, because not only do you have a well-structured program through SEALs, but have had 2 business ventures now.
Yeah. And that's, you could argue one way or the other, but that's, our perceived value proposition and why our client partners bring us in as a strategic partner is because we've also done it. And many of our, director level folks have done it and built organizations or had, senior level executive roles in organizations, but also have the, the MBAs and the PhDs and have worked at Deloitte or McKinsey or what have you.
Right.
And so there's a lot of diversification of thought and experience, but also it garners a certain level of understanding from the people we're working with, because they're like, oh, well, they actually know what they're talking about, not because they went through a training program at Deloitte, but because they've done it themselves,
Right.
and failed a lot in these endeavors too.
So there's a lot of lessons through all of that, right? We talk a lot about figuring out what your lessons are through failure.
Yeah.
Like, boy, if
Yeah.
you're not learning through that, you missed it.
Well, when it comes to that philosophy of failure, one of my SEAL buddies said this the other day. He actually said it to my son. We were going through this cool program that he's a part of called the Squire program for 13 to 15-year-old boys.
Mhm.
And when you think of the concept of failure, when you hit an obstacle, you're either winning or you're learning. You're not failing. If you look at it as failure, then you're looking at it the wrong way.
Yeah.
I call them micro failures, and they're just obstacles and things you're going to learn from and grow. It's a growth mindset. I talk a lot about that in the new book too.
Mhm. My wife actually a long time ago talked about writing a book. We never could figure out what she was going to write, and it never got off the ground. And the other day I was like, you got lots of time, you should write your book. And she was like, kind of out of it. But
I think everybody's got a book in them. I really do.
That's for you, Ashley. You should write that book. What motivated you to write it?
The first book, Taking Point, is a book really about leading organizational change and transformation, very into leadership and culture initiatives. That was really a strategic move. People are like, oh, you're going to write a book? You're a SEAL. Obviously, you're going to write a book. So they now, there's a fourth phase of BUDS now. It's writing, speaking, and acting.
During Hell Week.
Yes, yeah. And
And acting, is that a big
how to hone your six pack and how to gel your hair properly.
is acting a big post-SEAL career move?
A little bit. It's some guys are, they're kind of dabbling in it. They usually start off as like extras or sniper number one. See, there's my name in the credit.
That's funny.
But a lot of guys have, as you can imagine, written books, and that was not to get off on a quick tangent, but that was obviously very frowned upon in sort of the old school mindset of the silent warrior mentality. But there are important stories to be told, and guys tell them in a very humble and respectful manner, and mostly shining the light on the giants of whom they're standing on throughout their combat experience, and the teammates that we've lost, and telling their stories, so that we can all learn from that. And they're very important stories that have to be told, and if not told, people don't understand the sacrifices that our men and women go through to serve and protect the freedoms we have to sit around and do podcasts. And
I would say I've read a couple of, I'm gonna use my air quotes, SEAL books, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that you're spot on. Like the takeaways from them are, whatever the sort of organic points they're trying to make, but you get, I lost my brothers.
Yeah,
you get lots of that. And then you get, and these are men who led me.
Yeah,
I feel like you get a lot of that in those books, and so it's
if you don't have at least a certain base level of humility going into the program and the teams, you will either get it or you won't get far.
Right.
And of course, just going through combat in general and losing very, very dear friends is part of that journey, but it's incredibly humbling as just part of that job. So the first book was a strategic move to build what is now Taking Point Leadership, the company, around the book.
Gotcha.
So it's a thought leadership piece. It also helped me do the right research to create the foundation of many of our principles around culture transformation and leadership development, employee engagement strategies. So that was step one in 2017, and then built a business around it.
So let's talk about the business a little bit. What are you doing outside of the book?
So we're essentially a leadership and organizational development consulting firm. So we partner with clients and organizations, some medium-sized to mostly enterprise-level organizations, developing leaders and integrating employee engagement strategies, sometimes, fixing a broken or undefined culture as an organization. Usually it's a combination of all of that, because all organizations, as we talked about before, have the same struggles, regardless of industry and often regardless of size. Obviously, these things can get more matrixed and complex the larger the organization is, or if it's global and there's, silos based on just geographical location as well.
Yeah.
And so we partner with our clients to do that. We try to make it as measurable as possible, because I've fallen short as a leader in my previous companies by bringing in consultants. We don't like that word, right?
Yeah.
We are strategic partners, where we did the training because we had to check the boxes. We're like, well, we should do training. I heard that's the thing you got to do.
Everybody's doing it.
You got to do it. Everybody's doing it. And you got to develop your people, right? And then you just, do like once a quarter, you bring in some dude who talks to the team for like half a day, and people are bored out of their minds and checking their email in the bathroom and
snarky on the side, like, get a load of this guy.
Yeah.
When can I get back to my spreadsheets?
Well, and the people that would come in, like we talked about before, and then, not knocking anybody's career in that arena, but they didn't garner a certain level of respect because they were consultants and they were just training us on things they'd been trained on. There wasn't a lot of diversity of experience when it comes to answering complex questions about real, business challenges. Well, what about this? What about this? And they kind of navigate, kind of tap dance around, those answers. But, so that's our goal. And then obviously sprinkling in our approach and methodology, and a lot of our, sort of more or less proprietary curriculum comes from some of the leadership development programs in the world of special operations, specifically in naval special warfare. Mm-hmm. So integrating those things from how do we build high performance teams through better leadership, better engagement, the right culture that's designed to achieve results, to generate better business outcomes. And how do we measure that against our, financial performance?
What you said earlier, something I wrote down, I want to come back to, but I think you said something to the effect of all companies struggle from the same culture issues or something to this effect. I mean,
we always start a partnership with a client by doing some level of a needs analysis or an organizational assessment. It's kind of funny because it's very scalable because we're like, yep, same problems as the other company.
That's right.
Except they're an airline and they're a construction business.
I mean, what's the, not to secret sauce it, but what is it? What's the same struggle?
Well, from a high level,
yeah,
it's, organizations are flawed because they're made up of people, and people are inherently flawed, and we're inconsistent regardless of, I'm a student and teacher of leadership, for example, but I'm not a perfect leader by any means. It's a lifelong journey of development and course correction. And so oftentimes it's very much every organization has a culture. Whether they think they do or not, it's usually haphazard. Very few organizations have a really good, well-defined culture, or they say they do, and they put some stuff on the wall, and they have their core values on the website, but that's where it ends. Mm-hmm. It's not integrated into everything they do, from talent acquisition to onboarding the right employees to how they develop people, how their rewards and recognition programs, how they talk about the culture, how they integrate the core values, and externally, partnering with the right clients and customers. I've seen catastrophic failures in partnering with the wrong clients just because their money was green and they were going to invest a lot of, time and resources into, being our customer. And those relationships, in my experience, never last because there's a big, vast difference between values and, and what's important. And, or they're beating up your team, and, you're not defending your team, and you put the customer first because they have a big retainer and they're paying you every month. And, the board's like, no, we got to keep them. And they're like, well, 5 people are going to quit next week because they're getting verbally abused on every call.
Right.
So it's all of those things, are a challenge because most organizations are very inconsistent. If they do, have, development programs and they invest in people practices or culture initiatives or engagement strategies, are just very inconsistent in doing it. And many organizations just don't do it at all.
One of the things you threw into that smorgasbord was forget what it was. Basically, it was like aligning your comp structure with your culture. I don't know exactly the words you use, but that's the first time I've heard that integrated together.
Well, for example, so one of the things we work with clients on is developing something we call a team charter. It's basically, you could call it a culture manifesto or what have you, but it's taking your core values, 2 steps deeper. So if, let's say integrity is one of your core values, a great cliche core value for any organization.
Yeah.
Well, what does that mean here in this organization? What are the supporting behaviors that we will document and measure performance against with every employee, including every leader, against that value of integrity? That's at least bullet point 3 behaviors that support our definition of integrity. And then the final layer is the accountability mechanisms. All right. Well, how are we going to hold ourselves and others accountable to these 3 behaviors to support the value of integrity? And then, we call it our results pyramid. How does that integrate? What cultural experiences or rituals do we have or can build and create within our organization to support the behavioral expectations and the values and the guiding principles, so they drive the appropriate actions that people proactively take to achieve the desired result.
Yeah.
That's your 4-tier pyramid there. And that's how you align behavior with, better business outcomes. And it's also how you create a culture of extreme accountability.
Lots of that was the first thing I was thinking of when you were talking about that. I kind of lost track of the tiers, but I think it was like the 4th tier is like figuring out how you culturally, what'd you say? It was through culture or through
rituals.
Yeah. Create those opportunities to then head back up the pyramid.
Well, it's
That's really interesting.
like in the book, I like fitness analogies because it's really easy. So let's say your desired outcome is to run a marathon under a certain time, in 6 months from now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what rituals are
That is a very specific Kevin goal.
I got tired just saying it.
Yeah.
And my back started hurting.
Oh man, all the chafing just sitting in this chair.
So quick scroll moment. I was in a Zoom meeting and I had just done my long run the day before. And in the middle of the meeting and me speaking, I had to shoot up because my hamstring cramped up and everybody's watching me. And I'm like, why am I doing this to myself?
Oh, I almost threw my back out picking up a pencil off the floor this morning. But
You're not old enough for that. I feel like I'm old enough for that. And
my body's broken though.
Accelerated path.
Yeah, carried around a lot of gear and jumping out of planes, and but yeah, you set a goal, and what rituals? What is my daily routine? What rituals do I need to put in place to ensure I achieve that goal? What time do I get up? How do I train? What does that training look like? How do I set the right mindset to be consistent in that training module? Those are rituals that help support that mindset shift towards achieving loftier goals.
I was thinking about that this morning, actually. I won't bore everybody with a story, but been awake since about 3:00. Just couldn't sleep, like that just dink in the middle of the night. And I've been laying there. I was like, I just need to get up. Like, stop being lazy. Just get up. And then guess what happened at 4:30 this morning? Bzz. I was like, who's texting me at 4:30?
Was it me?
Kevin.
Sorry.
So anyway, I had that moment of like, it's 4:30. This is going to be my first victory for the day after I've been away for a minute, but I was like, my alarm was set anyway. And I was like, I got to get started with a W here up because you texted me. Otherwise I'd just been like, oh, I've been awake for a while. I got to get some sleep,
Man, plug that phone in the kitchen, get it out of there, buy an old cheesy alarm clock.
So I'm actively and aggressively pursuing that goal. Except the problem is I need something to like wake me up only, not Ashley also. So I've been looking at I think those Fitbits will do like the buzzy alarm thing.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to get one of those. Anyway.
No, I'm the same way because especially if I'm traveling or taking the first flight out, I got to get up at 4 or whatever. And I don't want to, and we have a newborn. So the newborn, they're sleeping in bed with you most of the time in between breastfeeding and whatever is going on. And so I've been trying to find a good way other than my iPhone loud, annoying alarm clock waking everybody up.
Yeah. Shout out Wes Butler. He was the one who told me that. He's like, you just need to invest in a $95 Fitbit and then you can just put that on, and it'll just buzz you awake.
Right.
So
I'm doing that.
Just hadn't gotten to it yet.
Before we jump out of this, I want to stay in it just for a second with the strategic partnership. When I'm reviewing this, I saw some buzzwords and I saw some main concepts, and I had the start and end of the journey in mind when you team up with a company. And with the start, it's navigating and leading change in the workplace. So what's needed to make that successful and start taking off once you align with a company?
Well, one of the things we actually, before we start enacting change initiatives within the organization, we train them on how to lead change. And a lot of those principles, obviously, again, going back to the first book, Taking Point, how to lead change, how to get buy-in, how to communicate a change strategy, how to engage the participation of the majority of your organization. I mean, it could be, and we could be talking about a major organizational transformation initiative or more small iterative projects such as we're rolling out a new software, project management, or whatever it is. But and this isn't my opinion, but, all the data comes back the same pretty consistently. Usually about 70% of organizational change initiatives either fail or fall significantly short of meeting their intended objectives. And it's usually not because of a bad plan or, an imperfect operating model. It's people issues. It's inconsistency. It's that we don't take the time to communicate the vision of what the winning outcome looks like because change is uncomfortable. It usually requires more work instead of less work, and consistently communicating what the benefit of that initiative is going to be so that people do buy in and they do participate consistently throughout the whole process. Because sometimes even your initial change evangelists will experience the fatigue of change because it usually takes longer and has more hard and soft costs than we anticipate. And that's just the norm. And so even your evangelists start to pull back and participate less. And so all those reasons and more are why initiatives typically will fail or again, fall short of meeting the objective. And the more that happens, the less people are going to buy in next time there's a new initiative. They're like, well, we've heard this song and dance. This is the flavor of the month. And here we go again. I'm going to wait and see. I call that the fence sitter. They're going to be like, well, you have your 3 people. You have your your evangelists who are bought in. Usually those are the more senior people whose idea it was. They're closer to what the outcome looks like and why they're doing it.
And you go do it.
Yeah. And then you have your people in the middle who are going to kind of wait and see if this is a real thing. And then you have your agitators who are going to push against it hard.
We've done it this way for 20 years. There's no way I'm doing it right.
Yeah, exactly. And oftentimes, though, you have to listen to those people. Oftentimes, those people have valid reasons. Because if we don't go through a process of most change initiatives fail because they start on step 6 and should start on step 1, and you haven't engaged the feedback also of all those people, especially the people who are closer to the customer or closer to the front line or closer to that process that's going to change. Well, we should probably get some ideas and feedback from them before especially if they're the ones who are going to have to roll it out. But oftentimes we skip that process. Those people push back. And if they're not listened to or heard, it becomes very toxic and cancerous. And then that cancer grows. And oftentimes those agitators are listened to because they have subject matter expertise or tenure or both. So people listen like, well, I think Frank's right. I'm not going to participate in this. And then you have a big divide.
Oh, yeah.
And then it fails and it fails again. And then you have, you create those culture gaps too, where, the organization isn't successful in any type of ability to lead change.
Man, earlier you felt like he was talking to you about that marathon thing.
Yeah.
We're in the middle of trying, and I won't put anybody on blast, but we're in the middle of trying to initiate or lead some change on a small subcommittee. And we had that one of those moments you talked about middle of last week where some of the evangelists were like, I'm out.
Yeah.
They kind of like reached the tipping point, and there's a lot of rich, even though there's 4 minutes right there, a lot of rich, like speaking directly to me about something I'm expressly working on right now.
Just trying to help you out, buddy.
Yeah. Appreciate that.
Just Bill's in the mail.
Put that
that invoice just got a little bigger
with the plane flight. Yeah. Just put it on there.
So then we fast forward to call it the end of the journey, and you might debunk that. But what I envision is you have a team of qualified professionals that bring energy, great ideas, and start getting the business you're speaking into to start acting on those ideas, and you start seeing the change. How do you sustain that once you pull out?
Oh, it can be pretty difficult. And that's oftentimes why, and this benefits us too, obviously, as our clients stay with us for a long time. Also, too, if there's general turnover or there's new people coming in or people, who have upward mobility in the organization are taking over these initiatives to make sure that they're trained. So there's a train the trainer element too, but also usually these programs, we want to make sure they last long enough so there is consistency in the new actions, because culture change or behavioral change or mindset shift doesn't happen at the beginning of a transformation. It happens at the end. You have to put in the best practices and the new procedures and the new, the new actions that need to be taken, just like almost every business has had to do over the past year due to COVID.
Oh, man.
And they start, you got to start sometimes on tier 2 of that results pyramid on, okay, we got to shift to new actions, new best practices, new procedures. How do we lead and manage remote teams? How do we show up? How do we engage a remote workforce? And what practices are we going to put in place to make sure we do that well? And then gradually over time, the culture shifts towards the new way of doing things, hopefully, but not always. So you have to make sure that the organizations have the right accountability mechanisms over the course of that, whatever that engagement is. But again, a lot of our clients stay with us for years because they understand the return on investment for making sure these things continue. And then the organization changes or it grows or there's new priorities that we need to work with them on. So,
yeah, the huge thing is saying the piece about the culture and mindset shift happens at the end, not the beginning. So the sales pitch isn't to change the mindset. It's the opportunity and potential behind it.
Yeah. Day 1, here's your new culture.
That's right.
No, I wrote it down.
Buckle
it's right
up.
Here. See?
Here's your new culture.
That's right.
Down. It's so funny.
This is you now. Welcome to your new identity.
sell it
Hold
for
on, let me read it.
$29. There it is.
Let me read that first. Oh yeah, it's stuck. Yeah, it didn't work.
Yeah, exactly.
So the other cool thing we talked about at lunch, that total gut punch for me and our journey is the idea of 360 reviews. So you want to talk about the importance of that and the framework of that?
We almost always integrate that into, especially like obviously leadership and management training programs, because you want to take a data-driven approach to it. You want to see what is your baseline, what are you working with, how do you customize a program to that, and then also how do you integrate one-on-one development, action planning, and coaching for the individuals, in that cohort of managers who are going through the leadership program. And, I learned this process by doing 360s, myself at my last two companies. And oftentimes people don't invest, we all think, oh, well, we got to, do this because, things aren't going well. But I remember with one of my previous companies, things were going great. There were no threats on the horizon. We were doubling in size. The board was happy. Customers were happy. It was just all, roses and sunshine every day. And which is a really good test of your leadership capability.
Yeah.
No bullets flying whatsoever. And so clearly all that success rolls up to this guy right here, me, the awesome leader of the organization. I was like, well, but I also, like we talked about earlier, I heard that people are supposed to do these, get feedback from the team. So I was like, the feedback's going to be good. So screw it. Let's do it anyways.
I can use this one.
Yeah. It'll just be some affirmation for how awesome I am. So we rolled out the 360 process for just a few of the senior leaders and founders and to start there. And then we're going to sort of cascade it down to other director levels and below. And so there's different versions of the 360. It was a pretty robust one. So the report I printed it out. It's like 35 pages of data and feedback. And for those listeners who don't understand, it's an anonymous peer review process. So they call it a 360 because in a best case scenario, it's people, your peers are reviewing you. Your direct reports are reviewing you, and if you have people above you, they're reviewing you too. And usually there's an other category, meaning you can select a few other respondents to participate. And obviously, you first really should educate people on why you do a 360, what is the outcome, so you go into it with the right mindset, because it's a little bit uncomfortable because you're getting transparent, anonymous feedback from people. And so I printed this thing out, and I remember I was flying from San Diego to New York to meet with a client, and I sat back and I was really excited and ordered a cocktail. I was like, all right, let's stretch it out a little bit. Let's look at this bad boy. Page one, I'm like, okay, let's looking at the numbers. I was like, the average is not quite where I expected to be. And then of course I just jumped straight to the comments. The comment section is where the respondent gets the opportunity to expand upon their feedback. And some people get very specific because, and as they should, you also educate the participants in why we're doing this. This is your opportunity to have a voice and improve the organization, improve the managers and leaders in the organization. And ultimately it's going to benefit you as a team member of the organization. And so especially those, oftentimes it's not, your disengaged or actively disengaged people who are, bitching and moaning about stuff. Oftentimes your highest performers are like, great, I'm going to show everybody what's broken in the organization. I'm going to show Brent what he's doing wrong every day. So the first comment was, what exactly does Brent as the CEO do all day long? I was like, oh, that's not good.
Rough start.
This must be someone else's report.
Yeah. And then this is flawed. And then, other small things like, what is our vision? What's our strategy? Who are we as an organization? Where are we headed? How are we going to get there? Like, people had really no clue, because in my mind, we had clearly articulated what the vision and strategy were, but we clearly hadn't. It was all living mostly here in my cerebral cortex. Mm-hmm. And then, a few more cocktails later, a little more crying, sniffling.
Yeah.
I went through the stages of grief, the surprise, the anger, the rationalization. The comments sometimes too are so specific. You're like, well, I know who wrote that, so I'm firing that guy tomorrow.
Right. Banker's box, Brad. Yeah. You're out.
You're out of here, Brad. I didn't really want to give you a voice.
Brad. Hey, if you're Brad out there listening,
no offense.
This isn't you, man. I promise.
So you have to go through some of the digestion. It's not about turning lemons into lemonade. It's about better digesting the lemons and using that as feedback to improve yourself, improve the organization. And that, going back to the philosophy of ownership and accountability. Well, if you want a culture of that, where does that start? Well, it starts with me, and being disciplined in that regard. And if people see that I not just accept, but crave their feedback on a regular basis on how I can improve or how the organization can improve, then they start behaving that way too. We have very much that peer-to-peer feedback learning culture in the SEAL teams. That's where, I kind of learned about the importance of really good, transparent feedback and creating a feedback loop and culture around that so that you can learn quickly and course correct quickly. Don't wait for the mid-year conversation or your QBR or, an end-of-year review to give someone on your team feedback. And these days it needs to be, a little more, sometimes even more informal and regular. Mm-hmm. So what I did was I put a plan together, built a presentation and, called a meeting, and it started as a company-wide meeting. You want to make sure first, am I hearing this right? Here's some of the main things that I took from this report. Here are the insights, and ask some clarifying questions on, am I hearing this correctly? And if so, great. I'm putting that on the list of developmental opportunities for me or for the organization and things like that. So it's uncomfortable, but if you start doing it on a regular basis, it's a phenomenal way to develop yourself, develop others, and also, again, shift the culture towards one of transparency and accountability and discipline, and the fact that we will learn from each other. And it's and that's really a core tenet of a high performing team.
Just the framework of that makes me want this, as opposed to being afraid of what's coming. And I would assume that's the natural progression of 360s. As you get them more and more, you start craving it. Like, how can we get better? How can I get better so we get better?
Yeah, and just in its simplest form, just going through the process with a team shows positive intent of, we want to develop, we want to get better, I want to get better as your leader. And that builds trust. And trust, again, is, one of the, trust and accountability are the two most important culture pillars of any high performing organization.
Pin that.
I'll let you guys have that one.
Yeah.
Is that for free? That was free.
That's not going on the invoice. That's
okay, good.
Quoted by Kevin Carey.
Man, I've never done it. The 360 thing. I think y'all done it before, haven't you? Haven't you done one?
We've done surveys, but no, not 360. We need to do a 360.
My instinct is exactly like yours was, which is like, I have blind spots, and the only way I'm going to find them is if we do something similar to this. And then my second one was like, kind of probably more what you were talking about, was like, I just want to hear how awesome I am. I don't really actually want the bad. I don't really want the bad feedback. So that was a real like roller coaster of emotion that I had immediately, simultaneously. But to your point though, originally, which is it has to be the pillar of a high performing team. Like you have to have a feedback loop.
Yeah. And oftentimes, of course, you're going to get some feedback and data that you expected to have, or you kind of already, know is a reality. But oftentimes, because we always ask, and our team asks the people we are coaching through the process is, mainly like, what stood out to you? What did blindside you?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question.
And it doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes everybody's like, yeah, this was nowhere near on my radar. Just like when I went through the
well, yeah, because you get like and I don't know what mine would be, but just hypothetically speaking, you get like every once in a while he's a little angry about things, and you're like, I knew that was coming, but like he's not compassionate and he hates my family. I'm like, whoa, what? Didn't know that.
That's Brad.
Yeah,
that's why you're fired, Brad.
Classic Brad. That's gonna be the title of the episode.
Yeah, Brad, you're fired. Pack your box, Brad.
Again, no offense to the Brads.
That's right. Okay, so I want to transition to the second book, Embrace the Suck.
Yep.
Man, really well written. I really enjoyed going through it, and I don't think I've ever seen a book that opens with a foreword that really sets the tone for the book. You know what I mean?
Yep.
All right, Embrace the Suck. It's a SEAL term, part of the ethos. I think you could.
It's a military term, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And what changed in my mindset when about to get through this book was, don't just wish for good weather, expect bad weather, hope for bad weather, hope for adversity. Don't wish for things to be smooth, hope for it to be rocky. And then you get on to the start of the book. So man, well done frameworking that. But I guess let's go back up high level. Embrace the Suck, your newest book, forward by the Beast, David Goggins.
Yeah, David and I, we went through Buds together. I'm sure many of your listeners know who he is. Retired SEAL, world-renowned ultra athlete, and broken some Guinness World Records, like in pull-ups and probably some other stuff. We were his third class. So he'd been at Buds for 10 months, gotten injured in both Hell Weeks. So he'd done Hell Week a couple times, or at least a good portion of Hell Week twice already, which I literally can't imagine. I'm like, I got to be one and done. I don't want to do this more than once.
Right.
I'm not that strong,
right,
mentally or physically. And so he rolled into our class, and I just remember, just a beast of a guy. Didn't smile. I wouldn't smile either if I'd been at Buds for 10 months. But
like it just embrace the suck, I guess. Right?
Yeah.
Holy man.
And so he was in my boat crew. So he talks a lot about boat crew 2. And so I was in boat crew 2. Just some hard dudes in that boat crew. A buddy of mine, Drew Sheets, had been a logger up in Washington. I don't think he'd ever like swam in the ocean before, but just a hard dude. he finished Hell Week with 2 broken shins and just kept his mouth shut because he didn't want to get medically rolled during Hell Week. If you if you get rolled back for an injury, for example, on like Wednesday, then you got to do it all over again. You start at the very beginning. So if it's like Thursday and your leg's broken or whatever, they'll usually roll you forward. So you'll pick up with the next class after their whole week. So a lot of people, and myself included, I had a fractured elbow. I had severe flesh-eating bacteria in my right leg, joint injuries in both legs. And you just got to keep your mouth shut. At med check, you're like, I'm good. Good to go. As the tears are streaming down your face. And so when I, was inspired to write the second book for the listener, Embrace the Suck, first of all, is a military term. It basically says, look, the battlefield, and we can use that term figuratively, the battlefield is hard. Don't just expect it to be hard, like want it to be hard. No, it's going to be hard, and lean into it. Find ways and tools and a mindset to move more quickly from, the bunker of normal human emotion when adversity strikes of, causal thinking. Why me? Why this? Why now? Why COVID? Why am I losing my business and clients? Why are we losing life? And moving more quickly into action-oriented execution, taking stock of your current situation, focusing on what's in your control. Mm-hmm. And not ignoring the rest because you want situational awareness, but using that to develop a plan and continue to step back onto the battlefield of life, of business, what have you. And, so it's really about, learning to use pain and suffering and adversity as a pathway to enlightenment and wisdom, putting better constraints on ourselves so that we can avoid temptation and all the shiny objects that derail us from achieving the goals we had already set. Learning how to set better goals, loftier goals, take a little more calculated risk, planning better, executing better, debriefing with yourself on a constant basis so you can, be in a constant state of improvement, doing all those things to really, live a more purpose-driven, fulfilling, meaningful life where you give back to causes greater than yourself and you achieve or exceed more of the goals you set. And learning how to use adversity as a stepping stone to growth, so that you can continually bounce back faster. So when I was coming up with the concepts, really, the book falls into the self-help genre. And I was like, well, I've never read a self-help book before. I was like, that's for losers. I don't need any help. Which of course I do. We all do. And so I was like, well, maybe I should read some self-help books.
You get a wide variety.
Oh my God, I had no idea. It's like a multi-billion-dollar industry, books and podcasts and things like that being at the top.
Yeah.
And so I did some research to find, I ordered a bunch of books on Amazon, and some of them I read fully, some of them I flipped through. A lot of just fluff and happy talk and just a bunch of BS that I didn't connect with, but very popular books that obviously a lot of people do connect with. But I connect with things that are more actionable. I like some of the books that I read that are a little more gritty and counterintuitive. I love Mark Manson's work. It's very creative, like The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F. And his second book, aptly titled, Everything is Effed. A book about hope. Like the best subtitle I've ever seen associated with that title. And I liked his style. Also I didn't see a lot, as much actionable stuff as I wanted to put into a book as far as tools. I call them mental models in each chapter. So if we're, talking about a chapter, I know we'll get into this in a bit, about how to be more successful in avoiding temptation. Okay, cool. What is the model? What's the mental model that I can use? What rituals do I need to put in place?
Well, just be strong.
Just be more hardcore.
Yeah, right. I think you hear a lot of that.
And you're like, cool. How?
Right.
Well, those are, so we call the tagline for us is wisdom nuggets.
Yeah.
What do we pull from this episode or books, etc. So the two main ones I had from this book, rewind to reading Living with a Seal. And the mindset is it's 20 degrees, but in your head, it's 75 and sunny. So that's what I ran with. I thought it was a good thing. Embrace the suck. Change that. It was it's 30 degrees and snowing, and smile.
Yeah.
Smile like a psychopath on the sidewalk because you wanted it and you're going to be tougher from that adversity.
Yeah.
So that was the biggest thing that I pulled from that book, just my mindset shift of just getting a little bit stronger.
Well, on that point, going back to the foreword that David wrote. So I was like, well, I want to write a greedy, more in your face, raw self-help book. And it does draw on many of the leadership development, principles that we actually teach leaders, because you can't generate better results in a team unless you generate better performance of the people. So it's very much a personal development strategy. So that was what kind of was the foundation of the inspiration of writing this type of book. And it was a really fun project. I was like, well, who better to write a book about resilience than my buddy David?
Yeah.
And so one of the interesting things about the foreword, not to give it all away, but a very interesting, fascinating, but unfortunate story is one of my most recent mentee I had met him, my wife met his mom. They live in Rancho Santa Fe in California. That's where he grew up. Very similar path to mine. Went to college, was working in finance in Miami, and then just decided to become a SEAL. And I have so much respect for these guys now, and obviously men and women who join the military during wartime, because especially in special operations, you're at the tip of the spear and you're going to go downrange to take the fight to the enemy. It is inevitable. Obviously things fluctuate, but more likely than not, you are going to go on a combat deployment, not just a deployment. And so I, my wife, Nicole, had come home for this charity event. She's like, I met this amazing woman. She's so awesome. And her son is in boot camp right now. He's going to Buds. I was like, cool, get me in touch with him. A week later, and this was a week before he was checking into Buds, his mom died of a brain aneurysm out of nowhere in Manhattan in a limo.
Wow.
A week before, his mom dies, a week before he checks into what's arguably the hardest military training program in the world. So, of course, for some people, that would crush their spirit. And other people find ways to use pain as a fuel for their journey, which is what he was able to do. And, I mentored him all through Buds, and he had a little bit of a rough go, like actually the majority of people do. He got a back injury right before Hell Week, so they rolled him back. So he was, doing the rollback thing for a few months, and then he classed up again when he was healed, and then he made it through. And that's the thing I love about Hell Week is it doesn't ever rain in San Diego, but God knows when Hell Week comes, because come Sunday night, it's freaking pouring rain. You're like, oh, there must be a Hell Week going on. Literally, our Hell Week was a winter Hell Week, and it rained every single day, every day. And so before he was about to start Hell Week, I texted David. I was like, David, it'd be really cool. I know you're busy, man. It'd be really cool if you could send a video or a text or something, a little message to my guy Charlie before he goes. He's had a little bit of a rough ride so far. Other than the fact, obviously, he lost his mom too. And about an hour later, David responded with, and I put the text in the forward, and it is just the most gut punch. And of course, using David's classic, very colorful language. We won't use it all in the show.
Yeah.
He doesn't hold back in that regard. Basically, kind of to your point, he said, he starts it off by saying, what are you going to do when you're so cold, your balls are in your stomach, all you do is want to quit, your boat crew's quitting, and you're miserable, it's cold. He's like, you better pray for the weather to be the worst possible weather. Pray for it to be the hardest Hell Week anybody's ever gone through. And it goes on and on and on. It's pretty interesting. And so that's that mindset. Like you said before, don't just say, okay, I'm going to navigate this adversity. No, want it. You got to lean far into it and expect it. And the more you do, that is part of sort of the mental model that is the foundation of the book, is being proactive in the fine art of comfort zone expansion, being intentional in how you do it. Find the things that make you uncomfortable, but that are imperative for achieving a specific goal, or the things that you're not good at that you really probably should be better at, and find the roadblocks and the things that will make you cringe that stand in the way of achieving that goal, and then practice them with intent on a regular basis. And then after time, of course, those things aren't so uncomfortable anymore, and they become, things that seem possibly insurmountable become part of your everyday life. And then you move the goalposts and you do it again. It becomes part of your mindset.
Transformational. If you can grab onto that and take action.
Right. Yep.
Okay. Other one, you kind of teased it a little bit, but there's a section in there, Taming Temptation Tiger. And that rang home true on a lot of levels for me, but go ahead and take off with that concept.
Yeah, that was a fun part of the chapter, right? Because I actually created a persona around who Temptation Tiger is.
This is evil thing.
Tony the Tiger.
Yeah, he's a classic guy. He wears a smoking jacket and an ascot tie, and he drinks martinis. It's perfectly groomed fur. Pearly white teeth, and engages in extreme debauchery on a regular basis. And really the chapter is about, because the book is very much about achieving goals. The book is not necessarily designed to help someone who is at complete rock bottom. It's also very much speaks to, I believe, people who just want to get better. It's a sort of a good to great strategy. I want to push past my current comfort zone. I want to push past my current level of achievement in anything in your personal and professional life. But at the same time, I have gotten a lot of messages that it has helped people who are battling cancer or who just lost a child and things like that. So that's very humbling and awesome, really, to know that it can touch people in that way. But chapter 4 is about putting better constraints on ourselves so that we can be more proactive in how we avoid temptation. And again, not temptation to do drugs or be led down a dark path to do bad things, but just the distractions we have in our life constantly, in our businesses constantly, the things that get in the way of achieving initial goals that we set, the shiny objects that constantly fly past our face. Or, ooh, that seems like a good idea. And the next thing you know, you're going down a different path and you're inconsistent in how you pursue goals, personally and professionally. So the mental model from that chapter really is about, it kind of goes into a lot of what I talk about having a better plan of what you're trying to accomplish and knowing what your threats and blockages are, knowing what the potential temptations are going to be and listing them, documenting them, putting that as part of your plan. Okay, you know what? I know where I fall short in this. I know where I'm weak and need to be better when it comes to being tempted to, do things that I shouldn't, or things that are going to get away in the achieving of that goal. And once you kind of list those and make those part of your, strategic imperative when it comes to achieving those goals, then you're more likely to have those things on your radar screen and be able to, and you will fall short, but you're able to course correct more quickly.
There's something, we talked about this last week. There is something about writing it down that is powerful. And we were talking about it with Elias last week about his journaling, remember?
Yep.
And I feel like journaling sort of is in vogue and out of vogue, writing it down. And I got in a bad rut of like, I'm just going to do it on my iPad. That's different. Like keyboarding it doesn't work.
100%.
Keyboarding it doesn't work.
And some people like doing that. I'm very much a write it down kind of guy. I'm a to-do list guy. I do like, people like journaling. Journaling. I'm not going to journal. It's
read about that in a self-help book once.
My 7-year-old daughter journaled. I can't journal. But it is, and to your point, and that's a very interesting point, writing it down, handwriting it down, journaling or making lists and things like that, and not having it on your, on your iPhone or your iPad. It's, that's everything in this right here. This, this book I'm holding is everything that I need to do every single day.
I was just about to say, probably with about 90 to 95% hit rate, the people who have sat in that chair over the last, 9 months or so have a journal sitting right by them. Yeah. Everybody brings one.
Yeah.
Right? And here I am with a piece of paper I didn't write anything on.
Well, that says a lot about you.
I think it does, actually. Just off the gunslinger seat of my pants. That's how I roll.
Well, it's the same, like having something available like this. Like I might think of something in our conversation, like, we need to write that down. For me, if I don't write it down and then, and follow up on it consistently, we're busy. I'll forget.
It's gone.
Yeah, it's gone. Or it won't happen.
Yeah. Well, that's why it was so important to me, Taming Temptation Tiger. I kind of correlated it with Habits and Choices. I was coincidentally reading Atomic Habits with Embrace the Suck at the same time, and what a combination!
I quote James Clear in the book.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Really, and then Atomic Habits. I haven't read the whole thing, but just awesome stuff in there.
Oh man, they're just so good. But how I can tame Temptation Tiger is being self-aware. You kind of hit on that. I have to know where I'm weak and where I can become weak. And when that moment or opportunity or whatever comes up, that this doesn't align with who I'm trying to become.
Right.
And that's how I've been able to take those words and apply it to my daily life. And I fall short a lot, but it's making me better and making me self-aware that doesn't align with who I'm trying to become. And it's about something bigger than me. I'm trying to lead people and make an impact and lead my family. And if these things are blocking that, then I need to do the right thing and get rid of them.
Yeah. It's when you say it that way, it's so simple. It's again, going back to put better constraints on yourself so you don't have to be tempted, because we're human. We will fall short in those areas where we're kind of weak. So if you're trying to, let's use a simple analogy, if you're trying to lose weight and get in better shape, don't say, well, I need to have a little bit more discipline when it comes to that junk food in the pantry. Well, just get rid of it.
Right.
Or like, I need to drink less. So, well, stop buying the huge handles of Tito's. Stop.
Well, that's junk food is kind of hitting home there.
Sorry, man. Sorry.
Now I feel like Brad.
Oh, Brad.
Okay. So one more thing on that book I just wanted to share. Funny moment. I'm on the second leg for my 10K run. There's an electrical box that I slap and then I turn back around. And when I turn back around, that's why I loved your book, that because I could get lost in it a little bit. You were talking about your sibling, and I think the sibling won like the Chicken Nugget Award or something. Am I? And
My son.
oh, it was your son?
There was a subtitle in this one chapter about the everybody gets a trophy culture.
That's
that we
right.
have right now, and I was joking on well, not my youngest son. We have a newborn. So my now 5-year-old son, last year when he was 4, he and his sister they were playing soccer, and as a SEAL, I was hoping for a little more discipline and accountability when it comes to training and mindset on and off the battlefield. And you know how young soccer games are. It's just a bunch of half the kids aren't even paying attention. Somebody's chasing a butterfly and picking his nose. And
the rest of them are all standing in a 4-foot circle,
like
just
huddle ball. And most of the time, Ryder's his name is, if he did ever connect with the ball, he kicked it in the wrong direction. Anyways, he and that at the end of the season, the coach, rounded everybody up and he was doing a trophy ceremony and of course everybody was getting a trophy. And I don't think they won a single game, but they're 4, so who really cares?
Right.
And he's like, all right. So there was this one game, before I tell the story, there was this one game where the one of the parents had brought in snacks for halftime. And usually you think like juice boxes and orange slices. This person, they brought like a whole box of huge chicken fingers, a halftime snack. I was like, that's the strangest halftime soccer snack for 4-year-olds I've ever seen. And so Ryder grabbed himself a chicken finger, and then before the second half started, he grabbed another one and took it onto the battlefield. And so he was just wandering around aimlessly eating a massive chicken finger. And it was hysterical, obviously. And and so like, it was Ryder's turn to get his trophy, and the coach was, in that voice you talk to 4-year-olds, and he's like, all right, everybody, who knows who the next trophy goes to? I'll give you a hint. He likes to aimlessly roam the field and eat large chicken fingers, and all the hands. It's Ryder, it's Ryder. And he went up to, he was so happy, and the whole ride home, he's like, can you believe it? It's my first trophy. And we got home, and I snatched that trophy right out of his hand. I said, we do not celebrate mediocrity in this house. And he burst into tears, and of course, I'm kidding. I, happily helped him find a prominent place for that trophy in his room, and congratulated him once again on a successful season.
All right, so right there,
I have. Oh my gosh! Hold the presses.
So he does the dramatic pause while you're listening to it, and I said out loud, "No frickin' way! He did not say that." And then you go on a course of kidding. I'm like, "Oh, I can't believe I did the
exact opposite of that."
Yeah.
Like, well, hey, sure. Like I said in that in that part, I was like, when is it? Is it ever too early to teach our kids to embrace the suck, and when is it too late? Because that that very much is the burden of command of being a parent is doing the hard stuff and saying no. You need to say no to more stuff, by the way, if you're overcommitted.
Oh yeah, I'm working aggressively.
We'll take that offline.
Yeah, I'm aggressively working on that. Is that like rhetorical? When is it too early to teach someone to embrace the suck, or is that real? Like,
no, I mean, I reference it. I don't really answer it in the book. It's just sort of a question to invoke some thought around, how we parent. One of my developmental opportunities. People always think, they assume because of my background as a SEAL that I'm like the hardcore militant one in the house, where it's Nicole, my wife, who's much more strict than I am. I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. And I need to do a better job of that, because obviously you can inadvertently create some, well, not lifelong necessarily, but some lingering impact on their behavior and their mindset and how they think about adversity when they're just given everything they want. And there's no real hardship.
Well, the reason I asked that is like very specifically for me, because like we go through those moments in our house, right? And the ebb and flow where you're just like, man, we live in suburbia Dallas, and my kids never want for anything. Right. And then, there'll be a discussion about whether or not we're going to get, hamburgers or hot dogs for dinner, and it turns into full scale warfare. And it's like, what are we talking? Like, dude,
or other people out there like wondering if they're going to get dinner.
Yes.
And it's not to be cliche, but you know what I mean? It's we live in Rancho Santa Fe, and, a nice neighborhood, and our kids go to great schools, and there's like no hardship on the horizon. And so sometimes you have to, manufacture that hardship by, giving them harder stuff to do and more responsibility. And,
if they don't learn it in your house, life will teach it to them. Right.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of what I'm wrestling with right now, is like, I have to figure out how to manufacture it, because if they leave my house thinking it's sunshine and rainbows out there, life is not going to be kind to them.
And they'll have a tougher time navigating complexity and adversity and uncertainty if we don't give them at least some baseline of tools of what they're going to, inevitably experience. So.
Right. I'm gonna make the boys read the book. Just do hardcore, embrace the suck. My children.
I keep asking Tyler, my 14-year-old, like, when are you going to read it? He's like, yeah, I'm not much of a reader. I'm like, you really need to read this book, though. These are my expectations of you, young man.
That's right. This is our family and house's core values.
What are your kids into these days?
Tyler's, he goes to a cool school called Cathedral Catholic in San Diego, plays football. And then Parker Rose, she's into horseback riding and takes ukulele lessons of all things.
Ukulele's super popular these days.
Yeah, I was like, where did this come from? This is a thing?
Yeah,
but
I feel like America's Got Talent made the ukulele popular.
Yeah, maybe that's where it came from. But yeah, she does it every week, and she is very much into writing, which I was very disappointed about because it's can be
insanely expensive,
a very, very expensive hobby. Yes. And we live in a very equestrian area, so I was like, oh, come on, don't you know anything else? Like,
there any mule riding lessons?
Mini golf, yeah, or something you can just do at home.
Mule riding. You know who rides a mule? Brad.
Yeah. Oh, Brad is he's a big mule guy.
He's a big mule guy. And
the rider, he's 5. He's into superheroes, and stuff like that, and then Walker, who's 8 months, is into breastfeeding. Who isn't?
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, baby in the house, man. My buddy Tim, I think probably today or yesterday, have adopted an infant, a new baby, and I'm just like, oh man, because he has like older kids. I'm like, well, skirt.
Yeah, it's talk about hitting the reset button.
Right.
I was, in where we live, I was like, who are all these old dads here at preschool and elementary? I'm like, shit, now I'm going to be one of them.
It's you, man.
Yeah, I'm the old dad.
That's right.
Well, not yet, but
I will be.
Yeah.
I'll be that guy who's 60 and dropping the kid off in 8th grade or whatever.
I've found with my kids, I progressively have like, man, I can't get super involved in school. I'm overcommitted everywhere else. So poor Stella, our 8-year-old, I'm just like, I don't know who her teacher is. Like, I can't keep up with everything, man.
Can't do it all.
Can't do it all. All right. We've been going for a minute here. I think unless, Kevin, you're our notes taker. Did we miss something?
No, unless if you want to talk about anything that's next in the journey or one thing.
What's next for you, man? 2 books. What's next?
For us, just continue to build the company, and in spare time, obviously focus on our fire team of 4 children. Just really, and doing a little bit of, rebuilding of the organization. COVID kind of stalled us a little bit because much of what we do traditionally was in person and live events, and, speaking at events is a great revenue stream for us, but also a great business development strategy. So, rebuilding those things and obviously keeping a close eye on, the progression of COVID and its impact on organizations. But yeah, just keep forging ahead. And my daughter wants me to write a children's version of Embrace the Suck with puppies in it. So maybe
I actually love that idea.
No Goggins forward in that.
No. There will not be a forward by David Goggins in that one.
All right. So the way we usually wrap these things up is just what we call the one big thing. Like you get a second to just say one big thing to listeners that you want them to take away from our talk, or they should implement in their life or whatever. So what's your one big thing?
It's a good question because it's actually how I end the book, Embrace the Suck. The last chapter is titled, We're All Gonna Die, So Get Off Your Ass and Execute. And it really is inspired by Stephen Covey's habits, 7 habits of highly effective people. Number 2 being, think with the end in mind. Act with the end in mind, plan with the end in mind, have your own personal exit strategy, if you will. A lot of people have been, very negatively impacted, with COVID and everything that's changed, and the loss of business, the loss of life, the uncertainty, the anxiety, mental health issues. But start thinking about managing that list of what I call life regrets. You have a huge impact on what you're going to regret when this short life comes to an end. And start thinking about what do you not want to regret? And there's a little model in the back of the book that says, when it comes to this, I don't want to regret this. And that could be family, life, business, faith, love, relationships. Again, going back to write it down and then act accordingly. So really, think with the end in mind and have that impact how you think about your career, how you parent, your relationships, who you surround yourself with, and who you shouldn't surround yourself with, all those things so that you can live a more fulfilling life that has much, at least fewer regrets than you want to have when it comes to an eventual close.
Love it. Thanks for joining us, Brent.
Oh,
this
thanks,
was
guys.
awesome.
Had a blast.
All right, Brent Gleason, 2 books, Taking Point, Embrace the Suck.
Yep. The books are on all retailers, both, brick and mortar, and of course the Amazons of the world. Company websites, takingpointleadership.com. And I'm on social media on LinkedIn, of course. And I'm on Instagram now. I was told I needed to do that. So Brent_Gleason.
There you go. If you're looking for them, that's how you find them. Check those books out. Man, thanks for hanging out with us.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.